Hello folks! Well, hasn't this last trip been just stellar? At the beginning of my long-term travels, I would have thought a week and a half in New England is a pretty big endeavor, but this go around, it was kind of a cakewalk, I'm not gonna lie. It was very fun though, although it differed from the marathon that would have been 3, 4, 5 weeks out onto the road. We just got to chill out, see a couple sights here and there, and it was a very low-key trip. Still counts. It is number 8, the New England Excursion Part 2, but it was a change of pace, and maybe that's what we need every so often, a change of pace. So for those of you who have been keeping up to date with the Coverage Project adventures, you know the drill. After every long-term trip that we go on here, I like to close it off with an epilogue to sort of put a bow on everything. Yeah, that's right. A proverbial bow on our adventures here in New England. Not that I'm in New England right now. As you can see, it's more of a different landscape. You're not going to find these plants and wildlife and scenery in New England. This is just going to be a tease. But for those of you who have just joined or have joined recently and don't know why I'm making this video, after every trip, I like to summarize my adventures, give you all an idea of what it was like, maybe off-camera, experiences I had, people I talked to, and most importantly, lessons that I've learned. I always like to take with me a lesson that I have learned on the road, whether it be a small one, a large one, or something in the middle. It doesn't matter. As long as I learn something, I can be happy at the end of my travels. This trip was no different, even though we covered a mere 6 locations, far fewer than we have in the past recent few trips. I still learned a great, valuable lesson that I am here to share with you all today. Not to mention, I'll give my personal reflections on everything towards the end of the video. Yeah, so let's dive right in. So before we really get into the meat and potatoes of all that there is to hear about from this trip, I want to do a little bit of a recap, just to get our feet wet once again with all the adventures we had on this short trip, as I usually do after every trip. So, oh, look at this. It's an alright view. We've seen better, maybe. I don't know. But, yeah, here we are. Nice little view, nice day. But as for the New England Excursion Part 2, I tried to go to the places that either I couldn't reach the August before, or decided, hey, I'm in this area, why not check it out? So we started reverse order. We went clockwise rather than counterclockwise through New England. We started in Vermont and went to its capital city, Montpelier, which was a very interesting small little city. Less than 10,000 people. Felt more like a small town, but yeah, that's where they do their government business. Then we went to New Hampshire. We saw Flume Gorge, part of Franconia Notch State Park. Should honestly be a national park. I really think so. If there's only one park in New England, I think there should be 2 added with Franconia Notch State Park. We saw those beautiful white mountains of New Hampshire. But anyway, we moved along. We headed towards Maine. Like Vermont and New Hampshire, we've been to those states, we've been to Maine, but there was a part of Maine that I really wanted to go last time we went to New England, but couldn't, and that was down east. So we traveled to the easternmost point in the US, and that was the little village of Lebec. We got to see a bit of the Canadian border from a distance, and that was pretty fun, just to say, hey, easternmost point of the continental US, maybe probably the whole US. Lebec, Maine. But then we went a little more west. For the first time, we traveled west instead of east. And then we got to see another beautiful national park, and that was New England's only national park. Hopefully, Franconia Notch adds to the list. But as of today, the park we went to, the only park in New England, Acadia, we saw 2 days worth of beautiful coastal mountains, forests, beautiful lakes and creeks and rivers, all that the crown jewel of New England's natural beauty has to offer. And then finally, towards the end of the trip, we got to go to a new state, a state that I've really wanted to visit on the Coverage Project, but couldn't because it was pretty expensive, but I found my way around I figured out a loophole to get at least affordable accommodations, and finally, we got to visit our first location in Massachusetts, Salem, the old site of the 1692 Salem witch trials. And that happened there. We got to see a bit of the witch history, very spooky little town, but also a very colonial town. And to cap it off, we went to another very, very colonial town, but also a very important town in America's culture. Boston, the big, sprawling East Coast city of Boston, where that was essentially the birthplace of the American Revolution. If it wasn't for the people in Boston and the events that happened there, we might not be a country. So yeah, that was our New England Excursion Part 2, the sequel. Hopefully, you all had a great time watching. So, having spent a week and a half to 2 weeks once again in New England, did I learn anything? Of course I did. I learned quite a lot about myself, about my perceptions and observations. So if there is one theme that fully encapsulated this trip, if there was a lesson I learned, one single lesson, it would be, don't let your first impressions be the final impressions. And what I mean by that is, give things a second shot. If your first time around in a place, or a first time doing anything, any experience, goes less than maybe what you expected or desired, well, try again, maybe give it another chance. Because sometimes your expectations can be wildly exceeded. Sometimes your first impression is different than a second impression. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. Oh man, look at this. You know, I'd like to think that I know where we are, but I don't know, I just can't put my mind to words and identify this area, this geographical place. I don't know. Do you guys know where we are? I guess eventually we might know. So going into our first New England excursion, trip number 5. Back, well, August of 2021, let's just put it that way. I came in thinking, okay, I have my idea of what New England is about. I'm gonna have a good time, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to capitalize on interactions with other people. Those initial impressions going into this trip were roughly the same as what happened after the trip. If you did get to see some of the places we visited on that first New England excursion, they were fun. I had a great time, but there wasn't that atmosphere that you would get in other parts of the country. And I explained this in Epilogue 5, that people in New England generally, they're not as friendly and welcome and warm-hearted as maybe other parts of the country like the South or the Midwest. And I felt a little bit disappointed that I couldn't really capitalize on any sort of fun interactions with people either at campsites or on the streets or just at a location or whatever. I was a bit disappointed because I thought, okay, the best way to learn about the culture is to talk to these local people of New England. So by the end of the trip, I was thinking, well, maybe that's just the way things are. Maybe people in New England aren't as outgoing or friendly or that type of thing. And I had a great time. The trip was great, especially as in Epilogue 5, I touched on the fact that I used my own outlook to better satisfy myself on these adventures in New England. With a positive outlook, focusing on the things that truly do matter. Maybe it's the little things, or just the fact that I am going to these experiences and places and locations, and that helped quite a lot, and I had a great time. But I knew there was more to New England than what I could experience just in one trip. I knew there was much more that I could definitely see on a second go-around, and that's what prompted me to think, okay, you know what, I have a little bit of time in between that Southeast tour, which was amazing, and some other, personal trips of mine that were in the works. I had about 2 weeks or so to go anywhere I wanted. And so I took the time and effort to plan a trip through New England, once more. But this time, I was gung-ho about getting to the places I wanted to go to, or finding the experiences that I didn't really get to experience the first time. So that was my main goal. I wanted redemption. And I think redemption is what we got on that last trip. Throughout the first New England excursion, I was controlled by my first impressions. And so, on this second trip to New England, I had the chance to reverse that. I had the chance to be the overseer of how I viewed things, what my destiny became throughout New England as I traveled again for the second time. And I told myself not to be controlled by my first impressions, to allow my first impressions of New England to just wash away, to have it start anew and see what this second opportunity granted to me. And I was more than delighted due to that personal internal decision, because my second go around here in New England was almost the complete opposite. I was surrounded throughout the entirety by very friendly folk, by people who would go out of their way to initiate dialogue and interaction. You could say it was the choices I made to go to certain parts of New England where they might be a little more friendly, a little bit more understanding and welcoming. But I attribute it to my personal outlook, trying to find the opportunities where I can find these people I want to talk to. I also attribute it to a lot of luck I received on the road. So I guess I could start out by saying, as I first entered to my first campground of the trip, up around maybe 10-20 miles away from Montpelier, that first location, it was so beautiful. Honestly, there is something to be said about the beauty, the underrated beauty of New England. So in the center of Vermont, you have all these beautiful mountainscapes, and this first campground was right in the middle of it. There was a nice river, a creek, beautiful, lush, verdant mountains. But that's not as important as the people that I got to see there. There were two people at that one campground. An elderly couple who basically said they hiked pretty much every mountain in Vermont, or maybe I'm paraphrasing, but they were avid outdoors people. And they invited me to their fire that one night, and it was very interesting to hear the insight from them. And then there was also somebody next door who was kind of part of that fire group, but he was on his own. He was doing his own thing. He was a manager of a local sporting goods shop, like a local one. In Vermont, people love the outdoors, and they also love when businesses are small, local, those mom and pop shops, you know? So he told me about his work experience and how he comes out just to bask in the beauty whenever he has time, just to enjoy nature. The people there had the mindset of more people from the West, as you might imagine, people from maybe Colorado or California. And thus, maybe they were just a little more friendly than people in other states. So, thank you, Chuck, from Montpelier, for talking to me, making my first night, second night pretty memorable. I appreciate it. And might I say, that first night or two in Vermont really set the tone for the future of the trip. I was lucky enough to have those interactions at the campground, and so I was really pumped up to meet more and more and more people. Of course, you know, it's all dependent on a lot of luck, but I also made the most of it by just getting myself in the mindset to give New England another chance. Oh, that's a pretty cool plant. I don't think we've seen that yet. Not in our adventures thus far. That's what you're gonna get here. But anyway, back to the story. I was traveling through New Hampshire, Maine, natural beauty, so underrated. Everybody go to New England if nothing else for the natural beauty. But I get to Maine, and I'm down in Acadia National Park. And up to that point, I hadn't had any real memorable major interactions since the Montpelier area, which is fine. I was still meeting people, you know, having decent conversations. People were generally friendlier, more helpful, had more smiles on their face. They weren't grouching about with a solemn countenance. But I wasn't really experiencing the level of friendliness that I had that first night. But that's all right, because once I get to Acadia National Park, things change. Very much so. So that second morning at Acadia National Park, parking was awful. Let me just say that. That first trail, I think it was called the Beehive, Bumblebee, something like that. Everyone wanted to go to this one trail. or maybe it was right next to the coastline, maybe people were parked there. It was the only general parking area for miles on that loop. And needless to say, people liked parking there if it was the only place to park. So it was such a trouble just to get one parking spot, and I had to walk quite a bit to get to the trailhead. And I was a bit disappointed, a bit angry almost. Like, why does it have to be now? But whatever, that's beside the point. In fact, I feel very, very lucky that I had to get to that parking spot because I was parked right in front of 4 people around my age who made the rest of that visit to Acadia something very, very special. So the pace at which I and then these 4 people were walking, sort of at the start of that first little rocky hill, we're about the same. So we get to a certain spot and they want a photo in front of some sign. Forgot what the significance was. They asked, since I was the closest person to them, if I could take their photo for them, and I gladly obliged. I try to do that whenever I go and I see people like that. And then I'm sure they had their reservations about talking to strangers and meeting new people. They were doing their own fun thing. It was something outside of their usual lives. They just wanted to have fun them for. So that's what I thought. And so I start asking, oh, where are you all from? Usual, typical tourist conversation. You know, that stuff. And they say, oh, we're from upstate New York. And I'm like, I'm from upstate New York as well. What are the odds? You know, that type of thing. And over time, over the minutes, they all get to know me. I get to know all of them. And it's great. And I love learning about people. And so it's just a fun thing. I didn't know that it would grow into a great mutual friendship that I would gain with these 4 people. So they actually invited me over to join them as they walked the trails, and we continued talking, and it was just a great vibe, great atmosphere to talk to these people. And then they said, you know, we're gonna be here for at least another night or so. Do you wanna come to our campground? And I thought, wow, that's a great offer, I'll take you up on that. Because I had nothing else to do after the video. I was just gonna make some ramen or something. But at the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, people say these things just to act cordial, just to, you know, be respectful and nice and have an overall good conversation. So people will offer things like, oh, if you ever need me, here's where I'm at, or here's my campsite, or something like, oh, if you ever want, if we ever meet again, things like that, where it's sort of vague about the meaning of which they're trying to convey. So I just took it lightheartedly. All right, I'll see if I can come over. And I truly wanted to. It was only when I finished my excursion up Mount Cadillac, that was something, that I was back at the campground enjoying maybe a soup or ramen or whatever I made. I forgot what I made. One of these people rides his bike to my campsite. He's like, bro, you coming? Where are you? We're waiting for you. And that really took me by surprise, very pleasantly and delightfully. I did not expect such a kind gesture. I thought I would just, you know, have to check up and say, hey, are you guys not busy? You guys mind if I, you know, come over as we agreed? That type of thing. But apparently, these 4 people, so nice, so generous. They gave me a warm welcome to their campsite. And for the rest of the night, we were just having a great, jolly old time, even late into the night. And I had a great time with them. So, to the 4 of you, if you ever see this, Jack, Zach, Jenny, Sam, if you're ever seeing this, I am beyond thankful. Thank you for making that little leg of my New England excursion so meaningful. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all. Oh, wow, it seems like we're in the backcountry here. I don't want to get lost. I don't even know if there's a trail above here. I veered off the beaten path. That's what we do here on the Coverage Project. We try to go to the places that people often don't want to venture. That includes getting lost in the middle of this area. But you know, I'm feeling like going to the depths of that mysterious valley over there. So let's do it. Let's continue the story. So, after Acadia National Park, I was just pumped up. You know, this was the type of experience I wanted out of New England. And albeit those last 4 people weren't from New England, but, you know, in New England, I got some friendliness going. So I ended the trip in Massachusetts, new foreign territory for us on the Coverage Project. And, oh man, that was just such an adventure. I was thinking, okay, Salem, Boston, those don't sound like friendly places. But in fact, they were. on the streets, off camera. There were so many helpful people. If I wanted to get someplace in Boston, yeah, you just, ask, hey, is there a way I can get here fast enough? And they're given explicit directions past what I know of the city. They expect that I'm like a local or something, so I would know all of the street names, turn right at this, wait a block, that type of thing that I was just confused on. But the important thing was, they were friendly in Boston. And in Salem, I was very, very surprised, shocked almost, that there were witches to this day. How ironic that a place that is known worldwide for the horrible execution and persecution of witches and warlocks and people who practiced non-puritanical beliefs is now still a place thriving with them, almost as a safe haven, as a little community of them. So you would walk down the streets and find all these, I don't know what to call them, Wiccan or witch arts, witchcraft, different shops like that would sell you various things relating to these arts. I still don't know what they're called. There's got to be a better name for it. The only bad experience I had in Massachusetts, honestly, the only bad experience I had in New England this time around was the Boston transportation. Yeah, I would not suggest the Boston Metro or the Underground or whatever it's called. And that's because where I was easily able to walk to Salem, but I couldn't walk all the way to Boston. So I had to find out what options were available for me to get from my little campground, I think Winter Island, if you want to look that up real quick. Yeah, you would have to take one available train line. And actually, I think the trains were broken. There was some problem with the rail, it was under maintenance, and so I couldn't take a direct route. I had to first take a bus, which would take me to the nearest train station, get off the bus, get on a separate train, and then go to the heart of Boston. That wasn't fun. The way back was even worse. And that was because the train was delayed. And that was because of two general events. The train was still broken hours later. It would have been for several weeks. I don't know what the train station schedule is like in Boston, but there wasn't much option for me to get from downtown to the campground back. I had to take the same weird auxiliary route. So I got off the first train to that proxy stop, and then where was the bus? There were so many people lined up waiting for the bus. Much more crowded, a populace than on my way from the first bus stop to that proxy location. Anyway, the bus wasn't there, and we had to wait for like 30 minutes just for another bus to show up, because I guess it was either off route or there was just, I really couldn't tell you what happened. I don't remember the problem. I was too upset about just having to wait. Maybe that's my fault, but finally a different bus came along and everybody flocked to the seats. For the longest time, we were just waiting there because there had to be checks on the bus or whatever, and so that added another 20-30 minutes. Everybody was complaining, everybody was pissed off, except for me, because I had two seats all to myself, and I was really riding that train of happiness, like, ooh yeah, I get to have some leg room. Right at the very end, it seems like nobody was getting on or off for a good 20 minutes, and then right at the end, some woman comes up, struts down. There were plenty of seats in the front, plenty of seats in the back, still, as packed as the bus was. She picks mine. She doesn't even ask, oh, can I sit here? She points down at the seat next to me and says, I'm sitting here. Like, what? Okay, that's fine. I probably would have obliged. That's fine, but I was really put off by the way people said that. Like, how in your right mind do you go up to a stranger and demand, that's my seat, I'm sitting there, move over? That really makes me think maybe I was just given some nice luck in Boston. Because then I got to see the true character of the people of Boston. It's as they come, very angry, upset all the time. I don't know. Maybe that's just me in my own head. And then you'd think there'd be some rider etiquette. Once the bus starts, that wasn't the case, because the woman next to me, she started dozing off. Very, very sleepy. And I'm like, okay, this couldn't be worse. She leans her head towards mine. No joke. Her hand comes 2 inches, maybe 1 inch towards not only my lap, but, you know, some parts that you wouldn't want people to touch. I don't know if she was aware of that. She was sleepy. She was tired. I can forgive her. But that was an uncomfortable bus ride for 45 minutes, you know, having to worry about 1, is her head gonna come crashing onto my shoulder? And 2, the concern of whether someone was going to touch me in a place I did not want to be touched. You know how when you're in those micro naps where you doze off and then jolt your head back up? Yeah, that was the same thing with this woman's right arm. Going down and down and down, up, jolted back up. And that's what it was like for an hour. I survived, you know, thank goodness. But that was quite the bus ride. I will never be using Boston public transportation again. I would much rather drive my car into the chaos that are the streets of downtown Boston than experience that day of public transportation again. I want to be the last person to scare you all into going to Boston and Massachusetts and New England as a whole. Aside from that debacle with the public transportation and that old woman I do not ever want to see again, New England was amazing. It was great. And I can thank myself for washing away those first impressions I have and trying to be open about making new impressions. So overall, I can't complain about the trip. We got to go to places that we never got to go, even in New England. I'm sure a 3rd trip is even due, just because you go to one region, you can't see everything. You can't see everything in one state. So maybe 3rd impressions are where it's at. But overall, yeah, nothing to complain about. The New England Excursion Part 2, the sequel, definitely redeemed my view, my image of New England. And I think you all should come to New England as well. You will see, not just in the places that we have seen on the coverage project, but if you want to ever venture off to places that we've yet to cover, I'm sure great fond memories await you all as well. Maybe it could have been set on my ways and said, you know, I've seen New England, I have my views, I have my impressions of it, I'm good. You know, maybe just get number 28, Massachusetts, on the list for the 50 states and then I'll be good. I could have done that. But instead, I gave New England another chance. People of New England, I hope you are happy that I gave New England a second chance, because I am delighted by the region. Ever more than I was last August. I gave things a second chance, and I was not controlled by the first impression that had befallen on me. Because of that, we make great experiences. And maybe in your life, maybe anything you do, the experiences you have could give you a bad taste in your mouth. You could feel like, I don't want to ever do that again. You know, barring a traumatic thing that really scars you, a lot of things are not going to go our way in life. But it's how we rebound against those unfortunate circumstances or lack of delight and pleasure in the experiences you have that you don't have to be controlled by. And so just how I gave New England a chance, I implore you, I suggest that you all find something that maybe you had an unpleasant or boring or whatever makes you not happy in whatever experiences you have in your life. See if you're willing to try it up again. See if you're willing to give such things that have given you a bad taste in your mouth a second chance, because maybe that second spoonful, that second taste in your mouth may just be a lot sweeter than you'd ever expect. Well, that's all I gotta say for today. You can see that we are in a different part of the country, which only means new adventures are bound to happen here on the Coverage Project. So stay tuned. If only we've discovered what this place was. You know, it's really boggling my mind. I wish we knew where we were. But yeah, standing at the edge of this cliff, at this undisclosed location that I really wish I could disclose for you all. But I guess there's just something in my mind preventing me to share it with you. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.